Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. So, this is something I've been wanting to speak on since the story broke earlier this week regarding DeSean Jackson's Instagram post, the anti Semitic comments, and the fake Hitler nonsense, and Steven Jackson jumping in there with all the ignorant comments that were stated and very, very offensive towards the Jewish community. So, it's one of those things that I've actually taken personally and wanted to really give some time and think on it and breathe before I even recorded any content responding to this, and it is deemed worthy to respond to. Before I get into that, I just want to give a quick plug that we will be recording and reacting to the Greg Kelly story from Leander, the Outcry series on Showtime. Once I conclude watching the series, we will have a video around that for all my Texas Longhorn fans. But regarding DeSean Jackson, there's layers to this, and it's very, very interesting because I've been very, very outspoken on this channel around where I stand in terms of the not just the protest, but the movement for justice in our country. Obviously, everything getting kicked into another gear following the death of George Floyd, and I've been respectful of when it comes to our Texas players and backing them, even though I may not agree with every single thing they do. I see them coming from a position of love and wanting to change things for the better. And I am 100% on board with that. And I just want to add, with that comes responsibility, not just responsibility to speak up on issues that affect other groups like we're doing today, but also accountability within our own communities and making sure that when we're asking other people, whether it's the police department, whether it's our political officials, whether it's just our overall leadership to step up, we have to step up as well. That's how I was raised. That's what I was taught, and I will not shy away from that. Accountability matters. Just because we've been oppressed in some situations or oppressed overall or been victimized and whatnot doesn't mean that we have to live as victims or not, recognize when something is wrong and do something about it. So I'm not going to get into the actual post. We all know that was wrong and it was ignorant and hateful or any negative thing you want to apply to that. But what I will get into is the response to that, and it has been disappointing. I do think overall from the folks that I follow on social media, because I try not to watch national news coverage. It's too much propaganda on both the left and the right, in my opinion. But from a overall coverage standpoint, I have been disappointed with the response to this, and considering the heat that Drew Brees got for saying something that wasn't racist or wasn't hurtful, but more so tone deaf and dismissive of what was going on, how his teammates felt. And they blew him up about it, whether it was the Saints, people across the league. But DeSean Jackson has this, and it's a different energy towards that. And I say all that because we're asking people across this country who don't look like us to walk with us and ride with us and stand in lockstep and be allies to further our cause for equality. But with that allyship comes responsibility to look out for others as well. And when wrong is wrong and racism is racism and whatever have you, we have to look out and speak up on those things. So just my personal background on it, I said I was personally affected. I actually grew up, believe it or not, right next to a synagogue. My next door neighbor, I had a next door neighbor on my left, and on the right was a Jewish synagogue and it was a lot of Orthodox Jewish folks that went to worship there. And I had friends and people in the neighborhood and folks that I've always grown up with. And I've had the privilege, I have certainly been privileged in my life to grow up in a community, in a neighborhood where I was surrounded by every walk of race, creed, religion. So it was a melting pot, and I always I've always been told, Steve, you grew up in a bubble. You grew up in an area where the rest of the world doesn't look like that, because I could see myself across the street. I could see a Muslim person across the street. It didn't matter. We were all in that community, and it was very, very unique growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and the suburbs, right? So it's something that does personally affect me, because those are people as well who are amazing people, and I know, they're smart enough to understand where to understand vitriol and whatnot, especially considering the history behind it. And that's where the frustration for me comes in, because for these brothers, and Steven Jackson included, to say, oh, you don't F with Hitler, you don't know much about Hitler. Brother, that's not an excuse. And as Emmanuel Acho brilliantly said on FS1, ignorance is no longer an excuse. And that goes for brothers as well. We have to do better, and we have to hold ourselves accountable. And Malcolm Jenkins had a very weak response, in my opinion. I understand being focused on the issue, and we're all focused on these civil justice, because in terms of our own issues within the Black community, we have been pushed aside too many times for too long. Totally agree with that. But it doesn't take much to speak up on something and condemn somebody and keep it moving and try to educate the brother on the back end. I applaud Julian Edelman, Jeff Schwartz, and folks within the Jewish community of the NFL for not participating in cancel culture, but choosing to, hey, this is what you said that was offensive, why it was offensive, and how we can move forward working together. Now, if you refuse that, or you don't want to see yourself or empathize with that, then that's a different story. Many people also saying, hey, DeSean Jackson, why wasn't he fired by the Philadelphia Eagles? You have to understand Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie are both Jewish men. And two things, because this is going to lead me down a different path. Number one, they get to make that call, as his bosses and the owners of the team and that he plays for, but also as the offended party, right? So they're in a position of power, and they chose to go about it a certain way. They have also had that precedent as an organization, going back to the Riley Cooper situation, when he had that incident with the N-word and the security guard at the country music concert. So we've seen this play out with them before. They handled it the same way. Now, in Riley Cooper's case, they ended up actually giving him an extension and moving on. But if it was me and how I would handle it, both times, and this is where you could argue they're better than me, because and be critical of me, and I'm just being vulnerable with y'all right now, of cancel culture, because I probably would have fired Riley Cooper, and I probably would have fired DeSean Jackson. But that leads me to my second point, which is how good you are at your job or how talented you are gives you more margin for error. We've always seen that in society, regardless of the situation. When Riley Cooper was a productive possession receiver for the Eagles back during those Chip Kelly, Michael Vick days, they saw value in him, and he was producing. DeSean Jackson has been one of the best deep threats for almost a decade now. And when you factor in him, him coming back to the Eagles, missing games, being injured, but he's been productive when he's been out there on the field, is my point. So if this was somebody who's a backup or a special teamer, yeah, they would have been cut. So their performance matters too. But if you're going to turn up on Drew Brees for something that is nowhere remotely close to as bad as what DeSean said, then you got to keep that same energy with DeSean. And I'm not for canceling Drew Brees. And as I'm learning real time, I'm also and learning from the way that Julian Edelman and these guys approached it. Let's give these guys a shot to well, not these guys, DeSean Jackson. Steven Jackson, different story, because he jumped in, tried to double down, and also is coming off ignorant. Now, I know he's also been meeting with people within the Jewish community. I think he met with a rabbi or something to address this, but it's been off. But again, accountability across the board. They deserve heat, and what they said was horrible, and it cannot be tolerated in our society anymore. Now, how we decide to move forward and work together, because ultimately we got to decide if we want to be on the same team or not, collectively as all American citizens, right? That includes white folks, black folks, Hispanics, everybody in this movement, right? That's why equality and justice is important for us within the black community, so that we can stand and benefit from those privileges. Privilege is not bad. It's just that it needs to be extended to everybody that is deserving of it. So we have to do a better job of the NFL. They can't shoot. They can't stuff this stuff under the rug, and we have to do a better job of not just being hard body on our political stances. That's been a sickness within our society, in my opinion, because we have too many people that, oh, I'm a conservative, and I'm any social topic that comes up, I'm going to be hard body on the right and not even think about it, not even try to put myself in someone else's shoes. Or I'm a liberal, left, progressive thinker, and I'm only ever going to be on this side. We have to think within context of these situations and empathize more as a community. And if you've never been in somebody else's shoes and you've never been through that person's struggle, that doesn't mean that person's issue doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that person is lying or trying to be a victim or trying to make something up. But on the flip side of it, that doesn't mean we have to be a victim or just lay down and be mad and angry and live with hate and try to get revenge at everything for the rest of our lives either. We have to think more collectively, in my opinion. So I applaud Julian Edelman, but I just want our folks in the community to do better and think on these things. As we're battling these things, how can we continue to move? People that are against the movement at hand right now love to bring up, well, the things that are going on in Chicago and the shootings around the country, and they have a point. It's bad. It's bad. Sequoia Turner, Devon McNeil, children that were murdered within the black community, that has to be addressed. And that has to be right there with the George Floyd situation. Those are children whose lives were taken. Now, the justice that gets administered is where it gets problematic, in terms of we don't think that justice is levied equally in terms of how the situations are handled when a civilian kills someone versus police misconduct. But we also have to factor in, these people are people whose lives were lost. Even Officer Dorn, David Dorn, who was murdered. All these people, Breonna Taylor in Louisville, still haven't had, like, all these lives matter. And so within our community, we are trying to combat these issues, but the last thing we can do, and the things that get our voices discredited, because we have the attention like no one else before, and Steven Jackson, who was, I understand the Brothers of Motion, being a friend and close with George Floyd, but we can't discredit ourselves either and turn people's ears off. People are listening right now. Not everybody. And there's a lot of division going on, but people are listening more than ever than I've seen in my lifetime. And so we have to use this opportunity to uplift ourselves and take individual responsibility in how we approach that, and listening across all sides. There's a lot of people that don't agree with everything lockstep when it comes to some things getting removed and other things getting removed. That's where we have to get away from that cancel culture mindset and understand that it's applicable in some cases and not in others. And others, especially when we have people walking around that we can listen to. Shannon Sharp, when you say Drew Brees should retire, but then you softball DeSean Jackson, it discredits you. And it's different situations. Hey, should that Grand Wizard statue in the Tennessee State Building have been canceled and removed? 1,000%. We cannot justify racism and treason in this country. So there are some things that are no-brainers that need to be changed upon revision, especially something that came up that was put there in 1978. And I know I'm jumping around, but I'm throwing out all these different examples because we have to provide more context and go situation by situation and really understand where some of these problems come from, in my opinion. So, I just leave off with saying, love more, listen more, and let's do a better job of taking care of each other. One of the reasons why I love sports and I hope sports can come back, especially team sports, however we get it, baseball, basketball, is because of the Julian Edelmans and the DeSean Jacksons being able to have those conversations. It's because of the folks, even though I did not agree with the brothers' approaches on the Saints of how they went after Drew Brees, but how things can get handled behind closed doors when they talk. Those type of meeting of the minds happen in the locker room, and it needs to be, I wish society could move the way it moved. Those of us who have been fortunate enough to grow up within locker rooms, especially at the high school level, you can't tell me if you went to a high school that didn't have a whole bunch, everyone that looked like you, that you didn't have friends on that, were white, black, or whatever race, because in there it's all for one, right? So when one person feels attacked, even if we may not agree up front, we can talk through it, work through it, and get things sorted out. So I'm just trying to speak from the heart right now. I know many of you may not agree or may say, however you feel. But this is my channel. This is my platform, and wrong is wrong. And I do not condemn what DeSean Jackson said. I do not condemn what Steven Jackson doubled down on. And I hope those brothers, and I'll end the video here, the Holocaust Museum and the idea of them going there, that is something that is very, very powerful. I've had the opportunity to go as a field trip when we went from Maryland to DC to go. And when I went back home a few years ago with I took my wife there. And it is one of the most brutally honest and beautiful and horrific experiences you will ever go through, going through the Holocaust Museum in DC. And I encourage DeSean and all those guys that because I think that's good attention. And however it's being handled during COVID right now, as they go through that museum and you get your passport of the person the identity that you assume, which are all real people, and you walk literally in their shoes, and there's a hallway with real shoes of the Jewish folks that were murdered in the concentration camps. So you go through what it was like at Auschwitz, and you see the rise of Hitler and the rise of Nazi Germany and the Third Reich and all these powerful things, and how hate could consume and start a war. I can't promote it enough, and from an educational standpoint, and to see what it was like for other humans. And even in the basement of the facility and downstairs, you go downstairs, they have additional content there as well. A lot of people don't know that and only go through the first 3 levels. There's actually another area in the basement. It's not just a shop, but where they run other videos and other content. It's something that has always been near and dear to me. So, to my Jewish brothers and sisters, I love you guys. And this is also just me from how I was raised as a Christian, as a man, to love, right? And to love, to try to lead in my own community, to try to do better. Those in the DC community that are mourning the death of Devon McNeil, the 11-year-old boy, breaks my heart. Sequoia Turner in Atlanta breaks my heart. Children. So we've all got to do better. To me, there's no other way around it. And, hopefully we can try to unify and improve our communities one day at a time. So guys, that's all I got today. And like I said at the beginning of the video, we will be back with coverage on the Greg Kelly situation as well, for all my Horns fans. So appreciate y'all. Have a great Friday. Be back later. Peace.